iTestify is about testifying of what Jesus Christ has done and can do in each of our lives. Through testimony of people just like you and through study of His Word, our prayer is to encourage each follower of Christ to be a light in this world. So let your light shine before men, that they may see your good works and glorify your Father which is in heaven. Matthew 5:16.
Hello and welcome to iTestify. Today we have with us Adam Ramdin. He is the executive producer of Lineage Attorneys, and he's visiting us here from Nottingham, England. Is that right?
That's correct, yeah.
All right. Were you born and raised there?
Not quite in Nottingham. I was raised about an hour south of that in a place called Warwick. There's a beautiful castle there called Warwick Castle. So I was born and raised there until I was about 19.
Wow. Tell us more about your childhood or how you became involved in ministries.
Okay, I was born in a home that was Christian. And so I was raised going to church, every week. And, all that entails, summer camps and, all the other extra church activities. And then at the age of 19, I came here to the States to go coal portering.
Oh.
And that was a very significant life-changing experience. And it was after that I wanted to go into ministry. And so I started, pursuing that and studied to go into the ministry and I wasn't sure exactly what type of ministry I wanted to go into, but I just wanted to do some kind of ministry. I was at the age of 19, a lot of my friends had left church, and I just had a burden to do something where I could reach out to them.
What about it was so life-changing?
Coal portering. It was, I think, just being on front line. You're at the doors, you're meeting people, you're talking to them, you're praying, you're asking for God to answer prayers for the day, and just seeing God work on a real basis, day to day.
Oh, like personal interaction.
Yeah, personal interaction with real people, that don't know anything that you know.
Yeah.
And so that was really good.
I don't know if you know the answer, but your friends were leaving the church, it seemed like, and it seems like that's still an issue that comes and goes throughout history. But what made you seem to gravitate towards spiritual things? Was it your family, or was it just an inter-relationship that you had developed early on with God?
I wouldn't say so. It's hard to pinpoint something. I read somewhere in Ellen White where she talks about some people have this road to Damascus conversion, and other ones it's kind of much more slower, and they can't really pinpoint was it there, or there, but it just kind of happened over a period of time. I think something that was key at that time of my life, I was reading the book Steps to Christ. And that just had a huge impact on me, reading through that book and just, taking those lessons on board and just, reading the steps through Christ at about the age of 18.
So then you'd be working coal porting, you decided to go into ministry, but how did you know where to go, and where did you start?
Wasn't sure exactly where to go. At the time, I initially went to a school called George King Institute. It's not around now, but that was where I started my educational journey.
Was that here or?
That was on the East Coast,
in
Maryland. And then I also spent time on the West Coast going to the Amazing Facts College of Evangelism as well. And so I went through there, and that's when I really wanted to get into frontline evangelism in terms of preaching evangelism. And so they offered me a position with them after I went through the course, and I got a chance to work for them and do full-time evangelism across the States. That was, for about 4 years, and that was really good. Really enjoyed that.
Nice.
Of all the jobs I've had, I think that was one of the highlights. Yeah.
So directly after you were done with the training, were you able to go into ministry?
Yeah, I guess you'd say it was a privilege. Not everyone gets that opportunity. But yeah, I had that opportunity to go right into work afterwards, and I've been in full-time ministry since then.
Wow.
So I worked in the States for 4 years, and then my visa was coming to an end, and so I decided to move back to England, and I started working over there as a Bible worker and a pastor in different positions. Yeah.
How did you get started with Lineage? Was it something that you were thinking about for a while, or in planning out? Or
Well,
was it just
first, Explain lineage.
Yes.
Explain what lineage journey is.
Lineage is a series of videos that trace the history of God's church, God's people. We start with the time of Constantine, and they're all short 5-minute videos that take someone who watches them on a journey through time. The idea behind it is that we learn, our spiritual heritage, what our spiritual lineage is. And so it was a project that started, actually, to be honest, it wasn't actually my idea. There was another guy that came to me, his name was Clive. He said, hey, I want to film something on the Reformation here in Europe. He said, I've looked on YouTube, and he said, everything out there is just very poor quality. And we need something that's done well, that's on, good quality. Let's film something together. So I said, sure, let's do it. I didn't really have any idea what that would exactly entail. So he said initially, let's just film some videos in London, because he lived in London. I said, okay, let's do that. And then I said, well, let's do Oxford and Cambridge and Lutterworth as well, because we can drive to them. And somewhere along the way, it turned into, well, let's just do a 52-part series, or and travel all over Europe. And then it kind of, well, let's do it and release them every week. And it was one of those ideas. Sometimes you have your projects you work on that are really kind of, okay, guys, let's sit around the table, let's have this board meeting, and you have an executive agenda and da-da-da-da-da-da, and you may come up with something then. This was kind of very organic. You just kind of started with this, and then it went to that, and then it went to this, and then it went to that. And so it kind of...
It's a very grassroots project.
In that sense, yeah.
Did you have a burden to teach and to learn about the Reformation before this, or was this really the start of the
No, I
creed?
was always interested in it before. So I think in that way I kind of fit into it.
Yeah.
Working as a pastor in England and as a youth director over there, frequently I have guest speakers who come over. And so whenever they come, I'm always like, do you want to go visit Oxford? Do you want to go to Cambridge? Do you want to go to Lutterworth? And do you want to go to London? So frequently, I would do kind of mini little tours around England. So it was something that I used to like to do. And I've done a few trips to Europe myself to see some of the places. So, yeah.
It's different because over here we're quite removed from it. So
Disconnected, yeah.
Yeah, but you
Geographically.
you have a physical connection so that you can.
Yeah, I mean, John Wycliffe's house, a church, is like 40 minutes from where I live, so it's
Awesome.
I can't count the number of times I've been there and just
That's cool.
had a look around.
So where did you get the content from? I mean, your intention was 52 weeks, about 4 5-minute videos. You're trying to make the content captivating enough to keep the attention of the viewer, but also kind of an appeal to go back to remember where we came from. But it's a lot of information to pack in there. Where did you get it? Did you have to do a lot of research to prepare for this?
Most of the place I went to was just my personal library, books I'd collected. So, some of the books that you might be familiar with, like Great Controversy, Truth Triumphant by B.G. Wilkinson, and then other biographies on Wycliffe or Luther were books that we use kind of quite a lot. There's one book called The Heroes of the Reformation that I have at home that has in-depth on the different 5 or 6 of the different reformers. So those are some of the books that I used. Alistair McGrath's The Reformation's Dangerous Idea. That was another one that I used as kind of research into the lives of them. But it was always a challenge to kind of read 3, 4, 5 chapters and then condense that into 500 words.
Yeah.
So that was always a challenge, but sometimes you feel like you're not even doing the person justice by cutting so much out. But the idea for the videos was not to do a comprehensive, in-depth video into someone's life, but to give a snapshot. Young people today aren't watching 50-minute documentaries really, most of the time. They're not just young people, but our attention span's a lot shorter than it used to be. And so by making the videos short, the idea is to introduce people to it, and then you hope they may do some research elsewhere, or they may maybe go and read something after that, but keeping it short as introductory, but still not so basic it's just boring. There's still a little bit of content in there to, engage the mind and learn things you may not have known before, even if you have read and researched, yeah.
You mentioned young people, and so this was geared maybe specifically for that demographic, or you had them in mind?
That was the intention. I work as a youth director, and so the intention was to create a resource that young people could learn their heritage from. I don't know if you saw that video that was it did the rounds on Facebook and on the internet maybe about a year ago, of the people that did that DNA test. And there was an audience of about 20 people, and each one of them did this DNA saliva test. And it was fascinating because, but they did it before and after. Where do you think you come from? And this guy's like, well, I'm English. And the other guy's like, well, I come from, I forget the country. I think it was one of them said, I come from Lebanon. And another one said, I come from Iceland. Another one was like, I'm German. And then they all did the saliva test, and then they found out, it was fascinating, because they actually found out that two of them are actually related as cousins to each other. And then the one that said he was English wasn't really fully English. He was like 20% something else and 30% something else. And so it was fascinating. And I think there's been almost, in some ways, a resurgence of people wanting to know what their roots are. And this is kind of the latest high-tech way of finding it, but I think there's a spiritual application that people want to know where we come from spiritually. And, why do I go to this church, or why do I believe this? Is it just because my parents did, and why did they, and what's the heritage behind that? If I'm from, this church, a Seventh-day Adventist church, well, does it just go back to, 1900 or 1860, or does it have roots that go before that? And so that was kind of the idea, to kind of connect the past with the present.
And like Reed, you touched on it, but there's a point to each of the videos where you come and you make it practical for whoever is watching it today. Can you talk more about the point of each one?
Yeah, an interesting. Well, maybe it's not interesting. That was never actually my idea to do that.
Oh.
I just thought they were just going to be like a historical 5-minute thing.
Yeah.
But Clive, whose idea the project was, he's like, maybe you should do an appeal. So I was like, you sure? He's like, yeah, let's do it. So then we did it.
Yeah.
And then it just became a fixed part of it. And thinking back to my personal background as an evangelist, I was like, well, why didn't I think of that? As an evangelist, you're always told to make an appeal. But now it's become kind of a part of it. And actually, a lot of people that we talk to, they say that that's kind of the part that they appreciate the most. Like, where the rubber meets, like, so what? So what did John Wycliffe, how does it relate to us today?
Right.
And so, yeah.
Especially for the youth, I think that would be important to them.
Yeah.
Or it would connect wires that maybe were not connected before.
Yeah, make at least one lesson. There's many lessons from a lot of these lines, but So that's another thing that kind of happened organically. It just wasn't strategically planned, but.
So you have a video for us.
Yeah, we do. Yeah.
Yes. Can you explain a little bit about it before we show?
Sure. The video we're about to show is the final one in what we would say season 1.
Oh, okay.
So it kind of wraps up this past year, kind of a summary of where we've been, and kind of points to where we may be going in the next season as well. It's called "Is the Reformation Over?"
Wonderful. Let's watch it.
Our spiritual lineage is a rich one, with many illustrious names stretching back to the earliest centuries. We started this journey tracing our spiritual lineage with the Celtic Church in Britain. We saw that as early as the 5th and 6th centuries, and lasting to the 12th century, there were Christians who were trying to maintain a faith based on their understanding of God's Word. The Waldensians of northern Italy were another such group who could trace their origins centuries back. The faith and belief of groups such as these stood in conflict with the claims from Rome that they were the Mother Church, and so they sought to either convert or destroy them. In an era of immense darkness, John Wycliffe arose, the morning star. Whilst he did not start a new church, by translating the Bible and through his teachings, he was able to peel back the layers of night that had descended during the Dark Ages. John Wycliffe was followed by Huss and Jerome, two brave men in Prague. A century later, Martin Luther arose in Germany, Zwingli in Switzerland, Farel and Calvin in France, and then Switzerland, all great men who went against the grain and remained true to their convictions. In Britain, William Tyndale would produce a beautiful translation of the Bible, something that would cost him his life. It was not an easy time to be a believer, but slowly and surely the light was beginning to shine. Proverbs 4 verse 18 says that the path of the just is as a shining light that shines ever brighter unto the perfect day, meaning that when God reveals truth to us, whether individually or collectively, He does it bit by bit. The sun does not just appear in the morning, but it comes over the horizon gradually. And so God gives us truth in bite-sized pieces. And so with the church, each reformer built on the steps of those who had come before them. The truth of justification, sanctification, baptism, Christian charity, freedom, and the second coming all came back gradually. Each of the reformers did not always agree with each other, but God used each one. As the Dark Ages ended in 1798 with the close of the 1260-year prophecy, and as the world entered a time period known as the time of the end, the prophecy said that knowledge would increase. This is not to be interpreted of knowledge of science or technology, but knowledge of the books of the Bible. In particular, Daniel and Revelation would be unveiled as we neared the end. Despite the huge gains that had taken place during the Reformation, Revelation 12 points out that after the woman or the church would come out of persecution at the end of the 1260 years prophecy, that God would have a remnant at the end of time. A remnant who, as Revelation 12 verse 17 points out, would keep the commandments of God and have the testimony of Jesus. But who would this be? And how would God lead His people in the 19th, 20th and 21st centuries? Join us next season as we continue this journey and explore our spiritual lineage through time.
Wow, that was great. I'm looking forward to watching all of them. I've seen a few, but I haven't seen all of them all together.
Yeah.
But that last one, you're asking the question, is the Reformation over? And it seems like a rhetorical question because it's not over. Mm-hmm. But why are you asking that question? And do you think that these videos are going to combat that?
We're asking the question because there are a lot of Christians today in the Christian world at large that would say it's over, or that if you ask them what the purpose of the Reformation was, they couldn't really tell you. Or if you ask them what a Protestant is, they wouldn't be able to really give you a clear answer as to what that is today. Mm-hmm. And so part of doing the video series is to reawaken spiritual understanding about our, I guess you say, our past heritage. And we're hoping that as young people watch them, they get a clearer understanding as to what were the issues back then, and to analyze whether those issues are still relevant today. Mm-hmm. And so we're trying to put it out there, and then as they watch and see, then people can make their own minds for themselves. I believe the Reformation or the issues that were there in the past are still relevant today, but people need to watch and see for themselves.
Have you thought about, you may have already tried, have you thought about releasing these or sharing these videos with just maybe like the non-denominational sects and say, hey, there's these videos about the Reformation, we would love for you to watch them and share them free.
They're all free. Good idea. We haven't intentionally gone down that route, but partly because we've been so busy this year just filming, producing. But we have had some moderate interest from people outside of our faith community. Like when we've, say, for example, put a video up there on Luther, we found that different German Luther Facebook pages are sharing those ones. And then the ones we put up on Wesley, the Methodist or the Wesley Society in England are sharing those ones. I'm not sure how they find them, and so we have had different people who've shared videos relevant, I guess, to their own background and history. So that's kind of been interesting and not something we've gone after, but it would be worth maybe going that way, yeah.
You never know how far they've clicked into the rest of the series. And
yeah, it's true.
And then they got season 2.
Yeah.
Yeah. So season 2's coming up. Now you're shooting it right now.
Yeah, we've almost finished. We've almost completed it. It's been a bit of a marathon, but season 2 is going to continue the journey. So we finished season 1 about the year 1800, with the end of the Reformation in its traditional sense, with the Methodist Church, and then we start with the growth of world missions. So we pick it up in season 2 there with how Christianity came to America. And so we look at the Great Awakening, and then we look at, how Christianity exploded here, how Adventism, the Great Disappointment, and we look at some of those events and see how that comes up right to our day as well. So I think that one's it's going to have a different feel or flavor to season 1.
Yes.
Season 1 was kind of like your old European architecture, your cathedrals and whatnot. Season 2 is more kind of, New England countryside and different feel, but it's going to be interesting.
Changes it.
Yeah.
But the format is the same.
It'll be the same format, 5 minutes, yeah.
Wonderful.
That's something I've appreciated about your videos. I've seen a few as well, and it took me back to where it was. I've never been there, but I understand like the type of environment that those people were in just from the videos. So I really appreciate that you guys are taking me directly to where these things happen.
So with this ministry that you have, do you have any verses that really drove this ministry or that you leaned heavily on?
Yeah, I think just to give a bit of background on the ministry, and then I'll go into the verse,
Please.
is that the team that's come together has been very organic. Initially, it was just me and Clive, and I guess neither of us understood how big the project was. We're like, yeah, me and you can do it. We had no idea. And then he's like, well, I've got a friend in the Philippines. I've not actually met him, but
But we're friends on Facebook.
but we've met online, we've kind of chatted about, video stuff, and maybe he can come. I'm like, hey, yeah, bring him over.
Cool.
So then he came, and then, there's someone else who does a little bit of sound engineering. Hey, he wants to come as well, or we can ask him. And then there was a photographer guy. Hey, we'll get him to come when he can. So it's just kind of, the team came together very organically.
Yeah.
And so far, we haven't had the budget to remunerate people for their time. So it's just been a ministry of sacrifice and a ministry of we're just going to do this together. We're not seeking what we can get out, but what we can give. And so that's been a real encouragement, And everyone on the team, aside from myself, I think everyone else is pretty much under the age of 30. Maybe 1 or 2 not, but pretty much under the age of 30. And so they're all relatively young. And I think in church today or in Christian circles, there's a lot of talent, there's a lot of young people that have so much to give. And too often we don't give them a platform. And I think, Lineage in some ways has given, young people a platform to demonstrate their talents and use their creativity to share the message. And so one of the texts, though, I think that really speaks to me is 1 Timothy chapter 4 and verse 12.
1 Timothy chapter
4 and verse 12. It's a familiar text that we often read in church. Young people often read it.
And viewers at wherever you are watching, you can also open your Bibles and study with us.
1 Timothy 4 verse 12, it says, let no man despise thy youth, but be thou an example of the believers in word, in conversation, in charity, in spirit, in faith, in purity. And what stands out to me from this verse is Paul is writing to Timothy. Timothy's the younger man, Paul's the older man. And Paul says to him, let no man despise thy youth. And oftentimes I've heard this text read in Christian circles where it's almost read as a rebuke to those who are older. Like, stop despising the youth. Whereas actually when you read the text, it's written by the older man to the younger man. And he says to the younger one, let no one despise your youth. Meaning, I think the older is saying to the younger, live a life as a young person that is free from reproof, cannot be despised, and that other people looking on can only say, what is God doing? And I think today there's a lot of things that any of us, particularly young people, we can live in a way where our life can easily be despised or, like, what are you doing kind of thing. And I think for young people to live up to their God-given calling and live in a way that let no one despise their youth. Even though you're young, you're living far older than what your age is.
It reminds me of an adage where it says that youth is wasted on the young.
Yeah.
So it's the same idea of where if you see someone living a godly life, doing great things on God's behalf, they stand out, because this is typically, especially as our generation, then every generation seems to follow in this progression where they're doing worse and worse and getting deeper and deeper into like just mundane, useless things, wasting time. And I mean, people at the age of 17, 18 were going to war, and now, our generation's like on Facebook.
Can barely get to college.
You barely graduate high school, barely. Yeah. I mean, yeah.
Yeah. It's true. So with Lineage, you've got a group of guys and ladies that are young, but they're using their talents creatively. And a lot of the creatives in Christian circles, not always using their creative talent for the Lord
Right.
or for ministry. And so it's really encouraging to see young people using their creative talents for the Lord to further the message and living in a way that people are like, oh, wow, we can do this as a people, And so this text has really kind of stood out to me. And I think it's, even though we haven't, it's been a theme or anything, but it really has been something that I think internally people have tried to live by. Let's live in a way that's beyond reproach.
Yeah. And certainly there's an aspect that has a sense of accountability to it. This be thou an example of the believers. It's not just, but it's elevating the opportunity that they have. And it's not this lowest common denominator. And you're young, so we're not gonna worry about you
or expect much of you.
Yeah. It's the expectation, right? But you're elevating it.
I think one
and
thing,
the whole entire life.
we really need to expect more of people.
Yeah.
Too often in church, we expect the 18-year-old who's studying to be an engineer to just read the scripture reading and maybe, if he's really confident, to do a prayer. Whereas I think our young people and those older can do so much more. And I think we should expect more.
Yeah.
And as we expect more, people live up to a higher
calling.
Higher calling and responsibility, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, it's been great having you on the show, and I appreciate all the work that you've been doing and your team has been doing with Lineage, and looking forward to the next series, and maybe we'll have you on for that as well. But in the meantime, you have your hands full, a lot of editing, and probably head back home and get some relaxation in. But we just want to thank our viewers for tuning in, and we hope that you continue to keep us in your prayers, and tune in to LLBN.TV for donations. Thank you.